Welcome to the Storytelling Podcast. Is that what it is? Story Studio Podcast. I don't know. I'm very
That's
confused
the
right
one.
now. I'm just very tired.
What did you call it?
Self-publishing podcast.
Self-publishing podcast. So we're going to talk today about villains. Villains are kind of fun to talk. Villains are very fun to talk about, actually. The best people, the characters I love to write the most are the villains. Is that true?
I like writing villains the most too. You know what I also like? It doesn't even have to be a bad guy. In the book I most recently finished, there aren't really actually bad guys. There's like a frenemy type character who, like got someone into a bad situation, but not a bad guy, not a villain, not Machiavelli in all that way, but just that antagonist. And maybe that's what this is even better, right? It's not really a villain even necessarily, but an antagonist, somebody who makes your protagonist stronger. Because in that situation, it's always fun because you like writing those things, Johnny, because of the conflict, right? Because there's argument. There's always like pushing the conversation forward, and there's like
I think you're
clash.
right. I think you're right. I think the difference is that writing a villain by themselves, like if you had something where somebody's in their own head or they're going about in their day or something, I don't think I'm more interested in a villain in that way necessarily. It's more that I'm interested in what a villain brings, like conflict scenes, and a good villain makes a good conflict scene. Right.
So, okay, if you take like one of the greatest villains of all time, I don't think it's the same as a greatest antagonist. It's not quite the same. And maybe it is, and I'm just being picky about the language. But like if you think of a great villain, the T-1000 is a great villain, right? Like that, he's just relentless. He's scary. If you're watching that movie, because you see the first Terminator and you're like, okay, that's the scariest villain of all time. Like that, he's a relentless robot. He's going to kill you no matter what. He came from the future to kill you. That's how hardcore he is. And then in T2, we have something that is like even scarier, right? Like, okay, that's something that a Terminator could be scared about.
And faster.
Yes. Right. Like it's scary. It's scary in every way. The fact that he can change shape, that whole thing where he's chasing and, he turns his hands into these big hooks and he's still on the back. Like the first time you see that, it's harrowing. So he's a great villain, but I wouldn't pick him as like one of my favorites to watch. Like that movie doesn't exist without him. So he's a fundamental, important character, but I don't think as a writer, I would get nearly as much joy out of writing him. I would enjoy those scenes, but I would think of them as action scenes. Like he's not a villain he's no more a villain than like an erupting volcano or something. It's like a scary natural, it's a force of nature where some of the villains that I'd rather talk about are more, just in our own world, Johnny, Carrie Barrett Kirby, right, is a great villain. Like she doesn't have a secret lair, nothing. She's a rich, horrible woman who is like...
my favorite is still Caspian for the same sorts of reason.
Right.
Just an obnoxious character.
So it doesn't need to be a mustache twirler, but like great villains like that inspire you to, as a writer, I guess would be a great way to frame this.
There you go. And why? In the spirit of an essay question. Great villain and why?
Yeah. So do we want to start with Dave? Do you want to go first? Because I liked your suggestion before the camera started rolling.
I actually thought of somebody else. Originally, I was getting to Mauricio as one of them, but I think the governor from The Walking Dead is.
Oh yeah, he's a good one.
And I think when you first see him, he's like this almost brutal dictator of one of the safe towns in The Walking Dead, and he's scary, and he's like the enemy of the people we're following, Rick and his crew, and you just see how ruthless he can be. But then they expanded on his story when they showed like a whole episode, which is one of my favorite episodes, was devoted to his backstory and how he came to be who he is. And
was this the one that starts with his big beard and then it's he falls in with that family?
I think so. Yeah.
And, that is a really good episode. I remember that.
Yeah, and just the tragedy that he experienced in it changed him and how he basically had to become who he was to for what he thought was the greater good to protect people. And I think they're kind of going the same way with Negan as well. But I think when you understand a villain's motivations and they're not evil for the sake of evil, they're doing what they think is right, even if it is fundamentally wrong, or it might even be gray area where it's right for them but wrong for other people, which is kind of how it is in real life. I think when you have a villain like that where you can really understand their motivation, and if the story was flipped just a little, you might actually root for them instead of the other group. I think that is the best kind of villain.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I like Negan and the governor as an example because both of those, I mean, first of all, before you know what an asshole the governor is, you could totally see, okay, he's created this little city for them. He's walled it off. Like, you can completely see how his ends might have justified the means because it's chaos on the other side of the walls. There's nothing but death there, and at least he's providing order. And I know that by the time, like, I'm actually out of Walking Dead because I think we finished, we got all the way through Glenn, the thing that happens, and and Haley, who was the only reason I was watching it at that point was because Haley, and she's like, yeah, I'm out. So once she was out, I had no reason to stay. But I'm glad
something happened that just repelled you guys? Because that's the way I got after a few seasons. I was like, fuck this noise.
Yeah, there was something specific.
I'm a martyr. I'm still watching.
Yeah, there was something specific. But beyond that, too, like the joy is just like I'd lost the joy a few seasons before, probably closer to where you did, Johnny. But there were two things that kept me watching. First of all, I had been hearing about what a glorious villain Negan had been for a while, with some really specific comparisons that many different people told me to look out for. So I was curious.
He's nothing at all like Mauricio, who was made first.
Yeah. See, I wasn't even going to mention that. But yes, there were a lot of people who said you really should pay attention to it. There's some similarities between Mauricio.
He's that beer batter bullshit, I swear.
Yeah. I was actually surprised both how much he does remind me of that character and how much he doesn't. Like, he's clearly his own thing. Yeah. But yes, sure. I certainly see why people wanted me to see the episodes. But Haley was really into it, so I watched it. But I would.
You think we could get Jeffrey Dean Morgan to do Mauricio as well? That'd be pretty damn funny.
It would be amazing. He is super, super good. He would be an amazing Mauricio. I just can't even imagine. He is. The next time I have cause to write Mauricio, he's probably who will end up in my head. So that's fine. But Negan was an incredible character, and I don't remember exactly what you said, Dave, but in principle, like, I totally agree, which is under different circumstances, you're rooting for that guy.
Yeah,
right?
They haven't explored his backstory yet in the show. They've only hinted at it.
I'll watch that episode, like, out of sequence. I don't need to see anything up to that. I'll just pull that episode out because that, I'm sure, will be amazing. But like, I'll go to my first villain because there's something similar here. So, and actually it's similar with Mauricio. So Mauricio is a monster. Like, there's no doubt about that. But
for those that don't know, we're talking about Mauricio Wolf of our series, Yesterday's Gone.
Yeah, so Mauricio Wolf in Yesterday's Gone is a serial killer. He's a foul-mouthed, like, really anything bad that you could say about Mauricio, he's that.
He's the worst of humanity.
He's the worst of humanity. But he's also, many people who read that book, he's their favorite character. And which is a point of pride for Dave, for sure. And I'll confess, for me too.
I love when I get email from a woman that's like, I know I shouldn't like him. I'm like an 80-year-old great grandmother, but I love Mauricio.
Yeah, we have had variations of, I'm a 74-year-old feminist. I should hate Mauricio on every level, but he makes me laugh. That tells us that we did a really good job with the character, and that's what Negan has going on. And one of mine that I really like is Hans Landa, who is the what do they call him? The Jew hunter in
I think so.
yeah, in Inglourious Bastards.
That was my stripper name, by the way.
I thought it was salt, sugar, fat.
Oh, it's good.
It was both. I worked at 2 different clubs.
Okay.
I like the Bear Jew better for you.
Yes.
But you know, he's just, I mean, that first 15 minutes of Inglourious Bastards, even if you don't like Tarantino, even if you like don't ever want to watch a movie of his, watching that first 15 minutes is still worth it. It's just a beautiful like short story. And if you haven't seen it, Hans is I don't know what his actual rank is in the German military, but he's been kind of consigned to find all the remaining Jews who are hiding out in France. And so it opens up in the French countryside, and there's a man chopping wood, and Père de la Petite is his name. And Hans comes up with 2 German soldiers, and they're looking for a Jewish family who he is hiding. And Hans knows that he's hiding this family. And the whole conversation, he is completely in charge. And he's just like such a great character. He's verbose. He's like, I don't know, the conversation, I think if I'm not wrong, in this opening scene, he speaks French, German, and English. I
think it's just French and English. And
then you hear German later?
No, I don't think there's German in it.
In the movie, he speaks Italian, because he speaks later in that one scene. So
I'm thinking specifically this one scene.
This one scene he probably speaks twice, but this character in the movie speaks 4 different languages, right? So he's intelligent and like, okay, clearly he's a psychopath. Like that is absolutely true, but he's also charming, like very charming. And it makes his danger like magnetic. Like there's something alluring about watching him, you know, eat his strudel and just smile while he's eating his strudel, and just being kind of like this disgustingly, I don't know, it's almost cartoonish, but it's not. If like, I don't know if it's the writing or the acting or kind of the combination of both there, but what could be like a really cartoonish performance isn't. It's magnetic and kind of unsettling. And I really like that idea that this person is so charming that their villainy kind of catches you off guard. You're enjoying when they're on the screen, and not just because there's tension there, but because there's so much that this character is offering. They're saying enlightening things, perhaps. I wouldn't pick this character, although this is a great character. I just wouldn't pick it as one of my few. But like Agent Smith in the Matrix series is a great antagonist, not just because he's chasing Neo and you know that anytime that they're going to, you know, face off like gunslingers, it's going to be awesome, but because when he's monologuing, he's interesting. When he talks about humans being a virus, that's fascinating.
I'll just cross Smith off my possibilities list here, because Sean's taken 3, I think, in this go round.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm shut up now. Your turn, John.
Well, no, to continue with Hans, did you have more on him?
Well, no, that's just it. It's just that I think that for me, what makes him great is that I enjoy every second on the screen, but also he challenges the protagonist, which is what you need, right? So in that one scene where he's eating the strudel with Shoshana, and we're all really tense because we don't know we don't know if he's playing with her. I think we even talked about this in Colorado, right? Does he know in that scene?
Yeah,
is
don't
he
even
playing
know.
with her? You don't know. You could say it either way. He either knows that that's Shoshana and he's just fucking with her because he likes the power play, which I could totally see that character doing, or he doesn't know. And Shoshana doesn't know. And we as the viewer have to make our own decision. But I like those kind of layers. And I like that. I like the writing that makes me really challenge my assumptions.
Dave, you want to go next?
Yeah, the other one was Thanos, who is the big villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I won't spoil Infinity Wars for those who haven't seen it. But basically, he's this Titan god sort of creature. I don't know. He's not a creature. He's a Titan, I guess. And he's seeking the Infinity Stones in Marvel, which basically will give him the power to do all this shit. And in the movies, he wants to eradicate half of all life in the universe. Basically,
half.
Yes.
there's exactly 2 times too many.
Basically because of dwindling resources. And in the comic book, it was a bit of a different backstory. He was
sounds like he's based on certain politicians.
He was obsessed with this Mistress Death sort of character and fell in love with her and wanted to eradicate half of all things, all beings for her. But in the movies, they actually made him a better character by giving him a backstory where like his planet basically died, was choked to death because of overpopulation. And I mean, it's still a bit ludicrous that that's what flips your trigger and turns you into a maniac, but it was more believable, and it gives some of the scenes in the movies more weight when people die and he makes sacrifices to show how far he's willing to go to achieve his end. To basically, he feels if he does this, that there will be everlasting peace, and this is basically his quote final solution. And I think it made him such a scary but also believable character, other than just this thing that wants to eradicate half of all for whatever, for shits and giggles, basically. And I would say in the Infinity Wars movie, like, he was the star of it because they show him a lot, and they show how he's interacting with the various heroes and other people in the movie, and you learn more about why he's doing what he's doing, and it is his hero's journey, basically. If you look at that
movie. I know you never probably have ever once paid attention to a thread in the Stone Table Slack, but there was one.
Wait, we have a Slack for Stone Table?
Yeah. And so
I pop in and see if I mention every now and then. I set the day signal up. It's just too much to contain. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. There was a great thread when Infinity Wars came out, and I couldn't resist peeking in because the title of the thread was "Don't read this unless you've seen Infinity War," and I hadn't seen it, but it was just such an inviting thread, and they were talking about how the movie is really better watched. Like, it's really supremely a disappointing movie. Like, that was kind of...
Oh, I disagree. I think...
Wait. Unless you go into it thinking of it as Thanos as being the protagonist of the story. And as long as you see it as his story and not the Marvel superhero stories, or it's not like any of them, it's really his story, then okay. It follows all the character arcs. It follows everything the movie is supposed to do. It did if he's the protagonist. And the argument was that Marvel didn't fail in the way they made the movie. Marvel failed in the way they marketed the movie, because
it worked either way, I feel.
Well, I do understand why people were disappointed, because they didn't know.
Who is disappointed? Everyone says it's like the best movie ever.
A lot of people are disappointed.
They're wrong. They're objectively wrong.
All right, fair enough.
I mean, they could be disappointed in the ending if that's what they're whining about, like the people that died. But I think that's stupid.
Yes, because it doesn't. Well, because it doesn't. Right, but it doesn't feel like a whole movie. And they didn't tell you.
Well, neither was Empire Strikes Back then. I mean,
and that's fair. That's totally fair. But there is some amount of marketing that could have been answered there, because you didn't know that you were going.
It wasn't a full movie. It was like 3 hours. Good God, how much more do you want?
But there's no closure there. But again, it's fine if it's Thanos' story. So it's all about context.
It's my favorite movie.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. But I'm actually glad that I read that thread, because that did help me before I went into the movie to kind of go in with the right frame.
Did it spoil the movie for you, the ending?
No, because they didn't talk about that part of it.
Right.
It was more about the I don't know, the point there, that it's following his arc, and that is a specific arc. And I don't think that most people who go to see a Marvel movie are going to have fun and be entertained. They're not really looking at it to pick apart the story structure or, the villain's place, and is he the antagonist or the protagonist, right? But we can't help it. Kind of that's how we're wired. We're deconstructing things. And yeah, I love that's kind of how you saw it naturally. I know you didn't see that thread, but that is why you enjoyed it, because you saw what they were doing as creators and not just as somebody just going to, see if, Peter Parker can, make it through the movie.
Yeah, I think a book or movie or a comic book or a video game even, like the best ones, they make you care about the villain in some way, even if you hate the villain at the same time. They make you... I've noticed like some like really good suspenseful TV shows like Homeland and 24. There's scenes where the people that are the bad guys are trying to evade the police or whatever, and you're actually wanting them to escape. Like they somehow make you like, okay, I want them to get away just for now.
Think about like Walter White in Breaking Bad. I actually thought about choosing him, but I'm like, well, he's not. He's the protagonist. He's just an anti-hero.
But did you pick Gus? Because Gus is another great example of somebody who brings the best out of the antagonist, because he's such a good villain.
Right. But I actually think there are a lot of lessons just to be learned from looking at Walter. Like he's not an antagonist because there's nothing to antagonize if there's only one person. But that said, he is
he's
villain.
An antagonist. He's the villain to Jesse, though.
Yeah.
Right.
And Jane.
Yeah.
And right, but not of the story, not the villain. But that's
right. No, but how interesting would it be if Breaking Bad was actually not Walter's story; it was Jesse's story.
Well, right? But what's so interesting about that, because it plays in everything that we're talking about. If you just look at him as a pure villain and you don't think of antagonist, protagonist, whatever, but like you talk about understanding, like that's what Breaking Bad is understanding this guy. Like every little thing is a little bit of slippage, a little bit of like, okay, well, I was with him to that point, and then, well, okay, he can take one more step, and oh yeah, I can see why he would need to do that. And then at some point, you're like, wow, I'm a monster. Like that.
Right. I think it's the opposite of what they did with Negan. So with Negan, they give us the worst of him first. Like our introduction to that character is terrible. We think that like there's just it's
the worst baseball game ever.
Right. It's the character introduction equivalent of the first episode of Black Mirror. Like you're okay, you're gonna either take this guy or not. You're done. And so once you're there, then you kind of agreed to have a relationship with this character on screen and see what he's going to do next. And then you're kind of fascinated. You're interested because his personality can come through. But that first scene is brutal to get through.
And I think with Breaking Bad, like it, especially like in the last episodes. Like with what happens with Mike and then Jesse's life in danger, like you are at this point, if you're not rooting against Walter, then you're probably, I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Well, you're rooting for and against him. That's the curious thing about it. It's like, let's see how terrible this guy can be and how much he can get away with.
Yeah, but you want, I mean, the line he crossed for me was with what happened with Mike. And at that point I was like, fuck this dude, I'm out. That was like, I mean, I was sort of there already with what happened with Jane, but
he crossed so many lines. The thing with the Lily of the Valley and the kid.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
I mean, that's some fucked up shit. That dude did some bad things.
And they're still exploring the universe. I mean, Better Call Saul is fucking amazing, and you still don't know how everything is going to end. I mean, they're making you care. I mean, Gus is in that now. Mike is heavily in that.
Well, he was from the very beginning, right?
I don't know.
I think episode 1 or 2. Yeah,
I don't remember early on though. But I mean, they're still exploring the universe, and they are going to flash forward at some point and really bring this. And I imagine Jesse's story is not over either. So I think it's all very interesting. The world that they've created with
yeah, I really, really love what they do. Okay, so here's the question: what do you like better as a creator and as a consumer, because these may not be the same thing. But do you like big villains? Because we haven't really talked about the biggest villains, right? Like Darth Vader, right? Clearly, big villain. Like the Joker is a big villain.
The Joker was on my possibility list. I actually decided not to choose him for this, but yeah.
Is it because he's too big? Same reason as Darth Vader? Like this, like
no,
Darth
Vader. I realize that this is heresy to Star Wars fans, but he's just kind of a cliche. Probably because he invented the cliche. Like there's probably nothing that can be done. Like, oh, he's too Darth Vader. Like he kind of can't.
Well, no, because the thing is, like George Lucas Star Wars was a grab bag of cliches in the same way that Indiana Jones was. It was like, hey, these old serials, like he was doing like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and like these old space serials, just like Indiana Jones was doing these old serials and kind of reinventing them.
Yeah, the big villains for me are a lot less. They're not relatable because they're just too big. It's just absurd. I mean, I can get behind somebody like the Joker because yes, he's big, but you could understand how, like, that personality is interesting. And just because he did big things doesn't mean that he's not cartoonish in the way that classic Batman villains were.
Well, if you take, like, is it the Cesar Romero Joker, which is like stupid?
Oh, no. This would be the Heath Ledger.
Or the Heath Ledger, right. Like Heath Ledger's Joker is, I mean, there's some versions of like the Killing Joke Joker is really, really good. But Heath Ledger, what he did, I mean, I know that wasn't just him. It was Christopher Nolan. It was Jonathan Nolan. It was David Goyer. Like, there's a lot of reasons that version of the Joker is so great. But wow, is that version of the Joker great?
No, I tend to like quieter villains just because they're more relatable. Like we have villains like that. We know people like that. Like Carrie Barrett Kirby in your earlier example is a really good kind of quiet villain because we all know somebody who's just a total asshole, and I dig that.
Oh yeah, like a certain PTA mom or like the president of the HOA association or someone, right? There's people in your real lives who are
you just get past them by making a Photoshop. It's embarrassing for those people. I actually I had a list, and the Joker and Smith were both on it as possibilities. But the one I'm going to go with is Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, that's a good one. I was wondering if that would hit. Awesome.
Yeah, just because he's so... I love the intelligence of that character and the juxtaposition of, like, he's a psychiatrist. He's very, very learned, and not just learned, but cultured. Like there's that scene. I actually don't remember. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Doesn't it, like, he kills the guy and then he's like playing classical music and having a glass of wine or something. Right. So it's just like, and you could tell he'd just be offended at somebody making an incorrect wine pairing or something, like eating faces off. That kind of character is really interesting, but the psychological manipulation that goes on between him and Clarice Starling is just wonderful. Like the way he makes her wait when she's like, I got to find Buffalo Bill. Just give me the damn answer. He's like, well, let me psychoanalyze you first, Clarice.
Is that one of the first movies that you ever saw where there was clearly a bad guy that you were just kind of like really mesmerized by?
Maybe. What I was interested by, particularly with Silence of the Lambs, when I first saw it, and still, is that it's the clearest example I can think of the bigger villain or the worse villain. So Hannibal Lecter is a very bad guy, obviously, but yet never am I rooting against Hannibal Lecter. I'm rooting against Buffalo Bill. So there's like the villain that you're supposed to hate, that everybody's that's the bad guy. That's everybody. Like nobody was sympathizing with Hannibal Lecter. It puts the lotion on its skin. Like, come on, get the fuck out of here. Nobody cares about that guy. But Lecter you're on board with. And I thought that was pretty cool to have a hero, a bad villain, and then this guy who's just in the middle.
He's basically a retired villain. I mean, he's not a threat anymore. He's in jail. So he's now kind of turned hero just because he's kind of helping her, the agent.
It's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
And
That's
this guy, the Buffalo Bill guy, is an active fucking threat. And he's also psychotic. And stupid. I mean, we don't like stupid people. So,
well, okay,
if you've done evil in the past, it's really not a big deal.
Well, it's not even like when we're watching. There's just no reason for us to root for Buffalo Bill. It's not just that he's a worse guy. It's not. I don't know.
Nothing personified.
Well, it's going to be hard to say this because it's not going to sound right. Because there's never any time where serial killing or cannibalism is okay.
What?
But you just kind of understand Hannibal a little more than you do Buffalo Bill. Like it's not chaos. He's crazy, but it's like it makes sense to him. He's not keeping somebody in a well and making dresses. All right, so I know we're probably on our way out, but just on talking about smaller villains, I thought of another smaller villain who is really classic. No, but let's see if you guys can get this. Let's do this. Okay, it's a classic movie and it's a classic villain, but he's not big over the top. I mean, he is, but not in like a Darth Vader or a Joker kind of way. He's just a villain, but he's got great lines, and he's the kind of villain that we're talking about because he's a real person, and he brings the best out of our antagonist, including our antagonist's great lines. Like they come from they come from.
When you say a classic movie, how classic?
Godfather.
Older. I mean, not as old as The Godfather, but older. It's
Die Hard.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes.
All roads
lead back
to Die Hard.
Hans Gruber.
Hans Gruber, right. Hans Gruber.
We can only do one Hans per episode. Come on.
Oh my God, I have two Hans. Wow. Yeah, Hans. Okay, clearly Hans is a great villain name.
Right?
Note.
Imagine your name is Hans. You're like, come on, just have one hero.
We just put a Hans in our latest book, actually.
Is he good?
No. I mean, yes, he is, actually.
Yeah, he's good.
We'll tell you something about him afterwards. It's kind of awesome.
Yeah, there's a reason his name's Hans.
So, Hans Gruber is really one of my favorites because he's just so... there's something... I love John McClane in Die Hard. Like, that's one of the best action heroes ever in that specific movie. But we all know that he's nothing without Hans, right? I mean... He only says yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, because he's talking to Hans. Hans brought that out of him. So I really like Hans in that kind of like smaller, over-the-top villain that's not too over-the-top, that's still a human, but it kind of serves what we're talking about in villains that bring the best out of our protagonists.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening to the Story Studio podcast. We will see you on the... Oh, you know what I should mention? As I interrupt the out is Smarter Artist Summit on sale. The last one. The last Smarter Artist Summit. How do you feel about
there's going to be a last one?
The last one. How do you feel, Dave, about this being the last Smarter Artist
Summit? Thank God.
We're going to make him fly in. Is going to be the best case of it. It's going to be the last time that he has to do it. So Smarter Artist Summit.
You can meet your personal villain at Smarter Artist.
SmarterArtistSummit.com. That's on sale now. So last one, though. Get them where you can.
We should hire somebody to be Mauricio there.
We should hire somebody to be Dave.
Ray Chase.
Oh, Ray Chase could be Mauricio. That would be kind of awesome.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Adios.